So then when that happened, how long did it take for Chuck and the death thing to happen? And who approached you about that? And what was exactly the way that
Well,
went
it
down?
was, I had reached out to Borovoy, and because Chris
Borovoy's
McCarthy,
going to come up over and over in this, isn't he? He's just,
oh,
he
to a
runs
degree, yeah, yeah.
Blabbermouth Kids. If you know, before Blabbermouth, he used to write for Metal Maniacs
That,
and a few other, I think Kerrang a little bit.
I think Kerrang, yeah, totally. And yeah, he was, a metallic journalist, absolutely. And I knew Borovoy before any of that, back when, the fanzine days and stuff. And he's always been a shit starter.
Oh, he's a fantastic guy.
Yeah,
He actually is a good guy, but he doesn't want
I,
you.
I, I dig Borovoy. I'm cool. I'm
I
totally
do
cool.
too. I like him, dude. I've always liked Borovoy. Oh, this is what I
And,
can tell you about Ultimate Revenge, and anyone else. Just to rewind it back for a second, when I was standing out in front of the Ultimate Revenge, and there was a line of people out there. There was all the journalists that pulled up in a bus, and I had
yeah,
a bunch of names that I've been reading for years, and then here's
yeah.
the boy over here. He's like leaning against the wall. He's hammered, dude. I like had to pick an eye. I was like looking at him, like which one? And he looks at me. He's all, Craig LaCicero. He said my name right. He's all,
Nice.
you seem like a pretty cool guy now, but mark my words, one day you're going to be an asshole,
Oh my God.
pal.
You don't forget stuff like that.
And
Yeah, man.
everyone's like, just ignore him. But he was right. I had my asshole phase, and I have to own that, But he was an asshole too. Anyway, but moving
Absolutely.
on. So Borovoy hooked you up with
Well,
the
yeah, because I'd reached out to Borovoy because Chris McCarthy and myself, we were going to carry on and do something cool and new and try to figure something out. And so I reached out to Borovoy because I knew, he had his finger to the pulse of a lot of musicians. And I was like, I'm looking for a vocalist. I love that guy, Pete Steele from Type O. And this was Slow, Deep, and Hard was the only one that, and, I remember he sent me a tape of like Nick Holmes from the album Gothic, A Paradise Lost. It's like, it's kind of in the vein of Pete Steele. I wanted a big throaty vocalist that could do some vocalizing as well. I'm not looking for straight death metal. But then all of a sudden I get a call from Borovoy going, hey man, I was talking with Chuck and your name came up, and Chuck and I started talking about, he's lost his drummer and his guitarist. I know you're looking for a gig, you're looking for a band or whatever, and Chuck's looking for a drummer. Are you interested in speaking? And at that time, Chuck and I hadn't spoken since the issue of them leaving the tour. There was the one we were talking about earlier. And, I was like, wow, interesting that Chuck would even be open to the idea. That's okay. Well, sure, man, I'll give him a call. And so I called up Chuck, and this was, it's September 5th. It happened sometime, I would say, I don't know, October or something like that. And a month later kind of thing was when this, the Borovoy call happened. And I gave Chuck a shout, and it was like we just picked up the last cool conversation that we had before, where it was like, we're talking metal, we're talking cool, cool metallic things that are going on. And it was like, well, cool, man. Like, I'm cool with this, bygones are bygones, because Chuck didn't, I thought it might be a little, awkward or uncomfortable or something, because we had that little war in the press going on, and there was always backbiting between both bands.
I remember.
Yeah, and there was none of that. There was no like, I demand an apology or I need to give you an apology. It was just like two old pals just picking up a conversation that, was cool. And so it was like, yeah, man, let's test the waters here, and Chuck was explaining to me, I have a riff tape, I'd love to send it out and see what you think. And I got the tape. I've always referred to that thing as the adorable little riff tape because it was tracked on a ghetto blaster and a ghetto blaster, tracked into one ghetto blaster, and then you push play on that ghetto blaster, and then you track harmonies and doubles and stuff like that
Yeah.
into the other ghetto blaster.
And a lot of those demos
No,
didn't.
this was 1990.
A lot of those demos made it to like all the reissues, right? I mean, there's like Ghetto Blaster recordings that tried to get remastered in these reissues that came out.
Ooh, I'm glad. Yeah, I did hear some of them. I hope they. Yeah, that's right. They did. I like the individual thought pattern stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those
Yeah,
demos.
no, it's
So,
crazy.
like
Well,
2 or 3 tracks.
I could say, dude, that thank goodness that you came aboard to do that because I mean, you probably don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. You know your impact, but you being in Death truly changed the trajectory of heavy music in that style because like, it really added an element that because people were kind of caveman to death metal back then. There wasn't really anything, and then all of a sudden, like the skies opened up, and there was experimentation, and those songs, man. That was just such a huge leap. I mean, I know that there was a pretty big leap. I am leaving out Human, which is a very important album.
Absolutely,
Very
that
important
was.
album. It really kind of changed my whole perspective of like what was going on there. But there was just something even more so. It was just more of everything once Individual came out. I was really shocked. And did you demo and just go into record, or did you play a live show beforehand? Did you do anything
No,
in
it was.
Florida? Just did the album, then went out.
Well, it was essentially I showed up to Florida and we had the choice of doing the Ghetto Blaster kind of demos again, but Scott Burns in all his wisdom, he showed up with a 4-track.
Hmm.
He gave Chuck a 4-track. Here's how you use it. Just track. Gene's gonna play some drums. You're gonna do some stuff over the top, and that's how we get to see how this is gelling. It's because Scott was gonna be producing the record, and so we made a real quick little. We put the entire album together in about 3 weeks, and then went into the studio. So it was, and which at that time was just, I was mind boggled. We put this album together in 3 weeks. Hell yeah! And these days, that's adorable. If you got 3 weeks to work on a record, yeah, man, cool. But I just thought we were just a couple of superheroes for putting this thing together that quickly. And yeah, and then we hit the studio, and Stevie D had come out, and
Uh, I have a question about Stevie D. Go ahead and tell
yeah,
me.
man,
I want to ask you about something.
yeah, sure. Well, he came out for the the final rehearsals, like say the final week of rehearsals, and he started getting a feel for the stuff. And then I think what happened, he was there for the recording. I tracked my drums, and then they sent the drums home. Recording of the drums. They sent the drums home with Stevie D, and he got to work out his parts for, 3-4 weeks kind of thing. And then he came back out and tracked his stuff. And at that time, Andy LaRocque had done his thing, and Chuck had done all his stuff. So Steve had.
Andy had already laid his guitar solos in before Steve came in and laid the bass.
I would not be surprised. I think they overlapped. I think Stevie D was there
That makes sense because
on the
he
final
did
day.
say he was there watching
That's
Andy.
right.
He was watching Andy claim that he had never worked anything out and just improving. But but I don't believe it.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. He's like,
Well,
he's
just
either
listen,
that top.
just doing my thing. It was way too orchestrated, way too written, and
Fair enough.
great. So Steve, like, and we'll get into this, but have you ever like, do you know him too much beforehand? Like, did you know Steve before he
Yeah.
actually? Okay, so
We
you did already know him.
being in Death made us super duper tight, but we were pals before, and
From Sadist, because I feel like Sadist was more in line with Dark Angel musically.
they were our little they were our first like little Northern California little brothers kind of thing. We'd play shows in all the San Francisco area places, and we'd have Sadists come out and play with us. So yeah, we were definitely pals before that, but it was definitely being in Death together made us the Laurel and Hardy brotherhood that we remain to this day being. Totally.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you: have you ever known anyone to be more sarcastic than Steve DiGiorgio in your entire life? Have you come
God,
much
no.
more of like a sharp tongue and wit to battle?
The only person I could even conceive of being close to Stevie D might be Jeff Walker from Carcass. You
Mm,
know,
we will get to.
yeah, that's pretty fun. But yeah, man, Stevie D is so dry and just so sarcastic, and just I've watched him just wind people up and them not even know that they're getting wound up. But the rest of us are just cracking up at Steve
Yeah,
is
he's hilarious. Which I mean, you might as well segue to him calling me.
yeah,
And this is and before I even get to that, I got to say, like, there was a lot of things, historical things going on at that moment. But I got a call from him, and it was back in the day where we didn't have cell phones, and it was
yeah.
email. So he got my number somehow, and I'm not even quite sure how. But he called me and asked me if I would be into doing that tour with you guys in Europe. And I remember I was deep into, like, oh, we were getting re-signed, and I was writing a forbidden demo, and I don't know, dude, I don't really have time to learn any of this stuff. And all these things came about, but it was right after I had seen the demo, or not the demo, I'm sorry, the video for The Philosopher. It was like I saw the video for The Philosopher, and then maybe the next day I got this phone call from him, and I was thinking, man, that fucking, like, look at this, like, look what they've done with you in the band. I was just tripping, dude. I was like, and then I was like, you know it just took me back and gave me some serious anxiety. I had anxiety. Oh, I don't know, how can I say no, but I can't because my band, and what am I going to do? So maybe you could explain from your point of view how that even came up, because I don't really know how it came up and how it really came to be. I'm not
Well,
really
let's
sure.
see. We knew that we had Ralph Santalla, and we were Ralph's introduction to kind of the outside of the local on Orlando swoopy doo one eye scene that
Right.
Ralph was part of.
Yeah,
And
we had one
Ralph,
of those in the Bay too. Yes.
yeah, well, he was not a metal guy whatsoever. He didn't understand the music, and but he was all about the shred. And we were pretty merciless with Ralph, but we liked him, but he was just, he just wasn't fitting. He hadn't become the death metal guy that
Yeah,
he
great guitar player though.
absolutely,
Fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
talented man, absolutely, that all props there. But we knew that he was going to have to, his other band, they were called Eyewitness. They were starting to do, get their like showcases and things like that. He was starting to take a, granted, his band was starting to do some stuff that we were trying to tell him, dude, we've heard your band, Ralph. Like, I can't imagine this thing ever
Let
going
go of the
nowhere.
dream, Ralph. Let
Yeah,
go of the dream.
yeah, man, you're better off. But he wanted no part of it and understood. You got a band you've been with for 5 years, and so we knew that he was going to have to depart at some time. And on that same tour, I remember we played One Step Beyond out in
Yep.
was that San Jose? Was that
Yep.
Palo Alto? Was that I
It was
forget?
yeah, like Santa Clara or something.
Santa
Yeah,
Clara.
I went to see you guys there.
You were, and I remember you were on stage left, and there was Ralph right there, and you were on stage left, and I kept yelling at you between songs like, "This is your gig, bro. You're gonna be doing this, man. Screw this guy. You're coming with us, man."
Oh
I remember
shit.
yelling.
I don't
Oh,
remember. I must have blocked that out.
oh yeah. Well, yeah, I'm fair enough. But, I was like, "Come on, brother. This is gonna be you, man. This is your gig now." And so, because we had been talking about it, and I think it was kind of like one of those things you might have spoken with Stevie D. Said, "Yeah, man, I'm open to it." No, I don't think you were open yet. I was pitching
I
it.
wasn't, dude. I was
Saying, yeah,
closed. I didn't
yeah,
know anything. I honestly was so wrapped up in just trying to get Forbidden a new record deal, because we almost signed to RCA in those dark ages. Like, we
I
almost had
remember
like a
that.
really big record deal, and
Yeah,
and then everything happened with Paul and Slayer and blah blah blah. So
yeah, man.
and then grunge all happened at one time, and I figured that death was like one of the survivors because death metal was still a thing. So I just figured that, no, I had no idea it was really coming until the phone call came, dude. I was the last one to know. So continue, because I still didn't have a clue.
Yeah, because I was pitching the gig at you from the stage as we're on stage. Come on, come play with us. It's your gig, bro. Yeah. So I think it had just been kind of brought up, and I think it was probably one of those things that maybe Steve hit you up, right around that area. Maybe Chuck had even come to you and said, "Hey, man, are you interested or anything?" I wasn't sure how it went down, but we were definitely talking about it when that One Step Beyond gig happened, and maybe you hadn't even been apprised of it yet, so you might have been like, "Why is Gene yelling at me? And what is he yelling?"
Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's the truth.
Blank that right out of your brain.
Well, I mean, I had tunnel vision. What people don't
Fair
understand,
enough.
so I mean, but he calls me and he says, can you do this? And I said, I don't think I can. I definitely can't go to Florida because I'm going to be recording this demo the same week you guys are talking about. And I don't, we did the distortion demo that week. And so I was like, there's absolutely no way. So I kind of like put it in the back of my mind. Then the next day he called back. And that's when he says, well, we talked about it and Chuck wants to come out to Oakland to rehearse.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, motherfucker. I'm like, now there's no way I can back out of this. So,
yeah, they're coming at me.
Yeah, they're coming. I'm like, oh, okay, but I don't have time to learn the songs. That's okay, dude. I talked to Chuck. He's like, no problem. So I was like, well, fuck. Okay. So yeah, you guys made, in my mind, a huge leap of faith, and I appreciated it, man. I had we literally finished the demo the day before you showed up. I listened to material, but I didn't learn anything. And I remember walking in the room with you guys in Oakland, and I go, just like I told you guys, I don't have anything down. And then Chuck said, no problem, dude. We'll sit here. We'll just we'll drink coffee. We'll smoke out, and I'll just show you a riff. And that was the beginning of it. And you guys were patient enough. I could tell Steve was like tapping his foot a little bit. I was like, come on, man. This guy should have known this by now. But you and Chuck, and you guys were patient. And, but what was great is I realized right away, from my point of view, that the Death material was considerably easier to play than what I'd been doing all these years.
Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely.
I mean, and this is no knock on Death. This is the genius of Chuck, because he made things sound really hard on those two records, The Human and Individual, in great part because the drums were so crazy, and so you think of syncopation and things like that. So I was like, fuck, he's like, he would show me a riff and he'd go, just play it 4 times. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's all you got to do. Like, so I learned those riffs. I'm like, what about the solo? He's like, oh, dude, what do you say? Let the metal flow.
Let the metal flow.
I'm like, okay. It's like, that was the next thing. If I would have stuck around, because we went to Europe, dude, and I was flying that first show, I was flying by the seat of my pants, and I never felt like fully immersed until a few shows in. And even then I was like, do I want to go to the bus and work these things out with the Walkman, or do I want to cruise around and drink coffee and partake in the European?
Yeah.
And Chuck's all, just go and do the coffee and partake.
Yeah.
That was kind of how it worked. But I did that first show in Bradford.
That's right.
Right. That was the one where Jeff Walker was there, and that thing went down backstage.
I remember that. God, I forgot about that till this day.
I was already nervous, and I'm doing my usual stretching and stuff.
Yeah.
You go ahead and tell that from your point of view.
Yeah, that's right. God, I totally forgot about that. He was there with somebody else, and they started kind of hacking on you for stretching. You were doing stretching.
1 second. I just want to make sure we're good, so there'll be no stop to this video.
It will not stop.
All right.
For some reason,
continue.
Yeah, man. Well, that was just it. I mean, you're stretching. It was you and all the guys from Forbidden, but you would always have a very physically taxing, stage presence. You got the windmills and you're banging like a maniac, and I was like, I've never seen somebody stretch like that. I think that's smart, and I think you're doing it the right way. And I remember Jeff Walker and his buddy Gaz.
He's a Swedish guy.
Was he Swedish? Okay, well, Jesus, God.
Yeah,
man. Guy. But yeah, I just remember, and yeah, we were kind of starting to get pissed at Jeff there, like, leave our man alone there, bro. Fuck you, dude. But I totally forgot about that, man.
Well,
Crazy. I remember it
here,
now.
here was how it went down for me, because I have my own routine, and yes, it was very physical, and I learned my mistake years ago and forbidden before that, when I would go have these horrible cramps in the middle of the night, and like wake up, like literally with my leg, like back muscles and leg muscles just contracting because I didn't drink
Yeah.
enough water and I didn't stretch my legs enough. So I learned that I got very limber. If for my years of wrestling, I was very limber too. I still am. I could still touch my toes and do all that kind of cool stuff old guys can't do. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I was just doing it, not thinking about like the implications of a death metal dude doing
You
stretches.
sure?
You don't stretch in death metal. So I was the thrash metal dude. I probably had stretch jeans on, like I don't know. In that moment, I was like, I was a dude in Forbidden, just coming in to sit in these shows, and I wasn't thinking of
Pretty
anything.
much.
And they were back there hanging out, drinking the beers, because no one else drank on that tour. Like with no one,
Yeah, sure.
nobody drank,
Yeah.
and maybe the sound guy or somebody, but anyway. So I hear, I don't hear anything, and then I see you like with a stick out. What the fuck you say? What the fuck did you? What did you fucking say?
Nice.
Yeah, you're like, I'm like, whoa, and then you like stood up, and I'm like, what's going on? He's all, don't you fucking, yeah, you said, don't you fucking talk about him. He's all, our dude, you like got all fuck. I'm like, and to this
Oh
day,
fuck.
dude, I've never seen you like get ready to fire up on somebody, and they were just like cowering babies, like in the moment. It was like, oh, and then they scurried out of the room. I'm like, what happened? He's all, they called you a fucking puff for stretching. That's what happened. They called me a puff. And like, and I was like, what's a puff? A fag. I'm like,
Holy shit.
I'm all they
No, we got to approach
well,
it.
they call me a puff. And then years and years later, after all that, Jeff Walker, like once I saw him at one of the shows for Bulgaria, and he's all, Craig, come over here. He's all, are you still mad about that? I'm like, I was never mad, dude, but I thought Gene was gonna, like, I don't, my feelings didn't get hurt, but yeah, he was tripping on that for years afterwards. He felt guilty about that.
Holy F. Holy moly. Yeah, Jesus. Well, good
That,
on you there.
that was my first gig with Death. Was like
Yeah.
right before we walk out on stage. I got to get insecure for a minute for fucking stretching. Like I'm like, oh shit, I can't stretch. It's not cool. So, but thank you
Oh,
for
God.
defending me.
Hey, anytime, brother.
You
I
know,
forgot I did that, but I do remember them hacking on you for that. I was like, what the fuck?
yeah, it's simply because it's not death metal to stretch before you go on stage. You're supposed to
Yeah,
stand
well,
there.
that's why we like to.
You back then you're supposed to headbang straight down, right? Like there's
Oh
only
man.
just like traction. If I did this my whole life, dude, I'd be. That's the reason I do this is so your brain doesn't turn into jelly from getting slammed back and forth.
Does it help? Does it help your neck? Because I do the straightforward, my neck and Laura's neck. We joke about it. Like, we got the crusty, crunchy, feels like a bag of gravel.
Yeah, well, I can still I hear it a little bit, but yeah, it's just something I learned how to do when I was young. Because I mean, as far as I knew, the only other guy that really headbanged like me way back in the day was Kronos.
Kronos and Eric Meyer. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's right, him too. But I knew him
But he
later.
got it from Kronos. I mean,
I was
he
already,
fully.
I was already, I was doing it like to the rhythm. Like Kronos is kind of just like mayhem.
Yeah,
I
sure.
figured out that this doesn't hurt as much, so that was
Oh,
pretty.
nice.
So
Hypnotized by the rhythm.
so we did it. We did the tour, and somewhere along the tour, I mean, this is when you and I became close.
Yeah, man.
I was close with all the guys. I had the easiest time touring on that thing that I'd ever had in my life, because Forbidden was always like, I was the youngest guy in the band, but I was kind of forced into leading the band. I didn't force.
Sure.
That was just the way that the guys worked out. Like this guy doesn't want to do that. This guy doesn't want to do that. Paul was a leader too, but he played drums and didn't write guitar riffs, so it was hard for
Yeah,
him,
fair enough.
his position to lead. So there's always like a resentment. And then once Paul was out, it became easier. But being on that run was the most fun and easiest time I'd ever had in touring up to then. I was like, why was it always like this? And I remember you guys were like, well, no. You're like, it's not always like this. It's like this with you here right now.
Yeah, man. That's
So I
right.
mean, you guys had I'd always heard that Chuck was difficult to work with, and I didn't see any of it. I just heard, so once occasionally you'd be, oh, that guy's a freak, I'd be here. So like, I'd be, oh, okay. So there's things, but I didn't, not Chuck saying that about other people, but he was a super sweet to work with. And he approached me about continuing, like, do you want to do the rest of the tour and talk about
Sure.
music? And I'm like, oh, I really considered it, but I was so loyal to Forbidden, dude. I was like, I gotta
Understandable.
hate
Absolutely.
me guts if I fucking leave to play death metal, at our time of need.
Yeah,
So I,
understandable, man. Well, I'm glad it worked out the way it did. I'm glad it worked out with you remaining with Forbidden because you know what a Forbidden's one of my favorite bands. Period. You are a giant influence on my writing, especially back in the Green era and the Man-Made God era. You're just giant influence on my whole approach on everything. So I'm glad that it happened the way it did, and that we've been able to be, remain brother, become brothers, and remain brothers for you
yeah, well, yeah,
know.
we became very close through that situation. I felt like, by the end of that tour, I had a real kinship with you, dude, and I had one with the other guys. And I was glad to break through with Steve, who was so hard to break through with.
Yeah, man.
And then we were cool, but he was the hardest nut to crack there. But then, after that, and getting back to the night I saw the video, for the Philosopher was the same night that I saw the video for Steve Vai, where
Yeah, man.
yeah, and you and I talked about that.
Yeah, I remember that night
Yeah.
really well.
I'm like,
Headbangers Ball.
be that singer for Steve Vai. I'm like, we should start a side project with that guy. We should just.
Yeah.
And then the death thing kind of runs its course. You do another album with him. Forbidden gets finally signed. We do Distortion. We do Green. Um, all this kind of happens, and the darkest days of metal, and you end up leaving Death under not great circumstances. What happens at the end of that?
Boy, what did happen? Yeah. Um, well, it was a lot of it was Chuck had he broke up Death during our final tour,
Oh.
and I felt really bad for him, because he did it as a total, fu to the record label, fu to the concept of somebody else trying to control him, and he had admonished Roadrunner, who the band was signed to at the time. He had told them going into the album release, he's like, there's a few things that are not going to happen. I'm telling you this right now. And if they do happen, I'll tank the band. Sure enough, Roadrunner did one of those things that Chuck had, warned them not to do. And he broke up the band on the tour. And then it just, I had screwed up. I deserve the fault. My fault in this. I deserve any blame is I got drunk before a show and I played a horrible show, and Chuck never forgave me for that. Um, and I was kind of like, I was pretty contrite about it. I felt bad. I didn't mean to, you know, harm the band. And Chuck impressed upon me. He's like, it's not just one member got drunk and this. I've got this reputation over here that I'm trying to climb out of, and having us being horrible at a show, and especially when it wasn't my fault. Yeah, I'm pissed. And I that was my only time I'd ever ruined a show from being drunk. I didn't drink before then, really.
Yeah,
um
I'd never known you to drink.
yeah, I just barely, it was in death kind of when I started doing it, because it was kind of like, Chuck was in charge of everything. Chuck did all the writing, all the lyric writing, did all the, the majority of the interviews. He did all the band biz. I didn't have to do any of that. So I just, I had time to, have some fun after shows, because usually it was me with Dark Angel. I'm the one having to get in the back of the bus and start writing the next album. I didn't have any of that. I had a lot of free time on my hands. So it was like, okay, I'll party a little bit. And on that tour, Steve Good and myself decided not to drink. We didn't. So my tolerance was real low. When I had 2 shots before a show, I was wiped out, man. I was drunk as hell. And so we had a big yelling at each other kind of thing. And of course, a couple years down the road after I'm doing Strappy, that show that you and I were at, that Dynamo Festival, where we got a nice little
Yeah.
photo of us in front of Death on
Us
stage.
watching Death. Well, how historically cool was that? You know.
Yeah, totally, man.
Well, we don't want to jump too far.
Fair enough.
Finish that up.
But it was at that show at the Dynamo that was, Chuck and I, I see him walking towards me, and I got to walk right past him, and he had a big smile on his face because I wasn't quite sure, He's like, Gene, how you doing?
I remember you not being like sure how cool it was going to be.
Yeah.
We had talked about that. Like, there's going to be, it might get weird. I'm like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen either. But yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it absolutely was not weird. It was like when we went back to that first conversation on the phone of just a couple of guys, hanging out and shooting the shit for a few, and bygones were bygones again, and all that. So it's like at least Chuck and I had that bit of closure. I'm sure a lot of folks can't say that about Chuck. So we had the closure, big hugs. He was like, dude, I love what you're doing with Devin, and remember that time we watched him on the Tonight Show with Vibes? Like, yeah, man, and you're like we had our own little Devin moment, Devin story and stuff like that. So yeah, there you go. So that was cool, man.
You cut to what I was going to ask you. Because my memories of Chuck, like I said, were all good, but I'd always heard stories about begrudging and, him being mad, but somebody doing something. And there was always like a little side story there, like how Chuck, basically once you got on his bad side, you were on his bad side for a long time. And I could
Fair enough.
a lot of names. And I felt very fortunate that I was on his good side. I felt like,
he always loved you, man. Absolutely.
We got along. Yeah. And was it not the fastest on our little run? Was it not the fastest the band played? Because I know we were trying to push the tempos faster. You were telling me, let's get this, I'm going to blast this part out. Because I remember we were flying, dude. My right hand at that point was like as good as it's ever been. I think we were just smoking on that tour.
I think so, because you could play. You're a good player. And unlike, how there's those guitarists, and it's kind of like catching lightning in a bottle. A rhythm guitarist that could play killer leads, and a lead guitarist that could play killer rhythms. Back at that time, there was a paucity of that. There wasn't a it was kind of like, no, you could do one or the other, kind of thing. But you could do both. And so it was like, all right, now we got, 4 dudes of kick-assery here. And, no disrespect to Ralph, but Ralph was a, Van Halen type hard rock shred guitarist.
Great.
He wasn't a death metal,
No, he wasn't. That was those kind of conglomerates, those things going together kind of work really well in those moments, because Glenn was like a Van Halen-y, Dokken-y guy when we got him in Forbidden Evil, so that does work. But I mean, my only regret is that I didn't have more time to really delve into it and figure out a lot of those solos on the spot, and I got really lazy, and and I delved into just enjoying myself and having a good time with you guys.
Well, I'm glad you did.
I'm also not in total embarrassment about it, but if I would have really dug into the solos and stuff, then I probably would have felt even better about it. But so your memories of Chuck actually ended on more of a positive note, correct?
And that is nice. Absolutely.
That's cool.
And that is the way that we've been able to carry on and do stuff like Death to All and things like that, and have the lineup that we have, because no matter what, Chuck was cool with the surviving lineup of Death to All. Chuck was cool with all of us. Obviously he didn't know Max. Max was probably 5 years old when Chuck passed, kind of thing. No, he's probably 10 or 15, but Chuck was cool with all of us. So that's why, there's no like, oh my God, we're, this guy's turning over in his grave because I'm involved in this. There's none of that, so
I
it's
think,
all just have a good time.
yeah, not to cut you off, but
Come on.
my estimation and the way I feel about the whole thing with Chuck, after all the, a lot of what he was like, the things he held on to, I feel, were psychosomatically brought on by his condition that was never diagnosed.
I tend to agree.
There's
When
no way to prove this, but I
no,
feel like that might have been really kind of an explanation as to why some things were rational, some things were not. Something, nobody's perfect. I mean,
yep,
there's nobody that's perfect, but yeah. So to me, I like, since I never got on the bad side, but just like objectively looking at it from my angle,
I tend to agree, absolutely big time. It's like once what Chuck ultimately succumbed to was something that normally is discovered in childhood and it's easily dealt with. But if it were to be undiagnosed into adulthood, it could lead to issues like Chuck had. And it did kind of explain a few things, I suppose, because we were, I've I've always said, hey, maybe Chuck was a complicated guy. And it kind of is dependent on one's own navigation through a complicated personality. It's how you decide to navigate your way through the complications that somebody else might be having. But when Chuck was diagnosed with what he had, and then when we heard normally it's discovered in childhood, we all thought, maybe this explains a few things, but we were never able to see the other side of it, because Chuck ultimately, like, obviously.
he was a bit of a closed book. He didn't want to let everyone in all the time. So,
Fair enough, absolutely.
and you know better than me. One of my one of the funny, and I know you'll get a kick out of this. One of the funniest memories I have of that tour was when I was breaking off Rob Halford actually explaining to him that he is gay. Chuck's all, no. He's like, and later on, I'm sure he came to terms with that, like all the rest of us. Like, I think Rob is one of the bravest dudes I've ever come across in my life. I think, but I was trying to explain to him, like, how could you have not known, dude? Like,
I remember you used the term flying the flag all the way back to stuff like, staying class and beyond that kind of
sin
thing.
after sin.
Yeah.
Sin. I mean, yeah. Which is Raw Deal is about his a dream escapade at Fire Island that he never actually had, which I found out through his book later on that's he was writing about a place where he wanted to go, but he hadn't been yet.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, like trailblazer, and
Absolutely.
I just remember sitting on the bus countless nights, just like, yeah, dude, I'm giving him like fake song titles and alternate ones. He's like, no, dude, no. And it was fucking great. But may he rest in peace, and same with Ralph. And these
Absolutely.
these guys are all, a lot of guys in Death Head ironically died. A lot of guys.
Yeah, man. Boy, it's challenging, or have been sick to a degree. You got obviously Mr. Reiner and James Murphy. He's had his issues.
Yeah,
So
he's 100% better too, which is amazing.
oh yay!
Yeah,
I did
I
not
didn't
know.
he was going through it, like, and it explained everything. And I've had talking when we were doing the Man-Made God stuff. He was living in the studio above us, and he used to come walking by the room all, like, and my singer wanted to beat him up. I'm like, no, you can't.
Damn.
He's a legend, dude. You don't, it's James fucking Murphy. He's like, I don't know who the fuck he is, but he get in my face and he wants 25 grand. Yeah, he's about 25 grand, which is crazy to think, because I've talked to James since then, and many times on Facebook we're friends, and I could just see he's completely together. And
Oh, good.
He's all, honestly, dude, he's all, because what was in my head and what was going on, I don't remember that entire era. It's like it's been pulled out of my head and it's over here.
Understandable.
So him and Chuck and their disagreements, basically the way I see it, were both brought on by brain issues that were undiagnosed, and they never got to reconcile.
Yeah, man.
You reconcile, and a lot of these other guys did. So that's a really positive thing.